M5. Did I do anything on M5 or did we stop before we started doing anything on M5? Okay. Well, we certainly did that. I just don't know how far we get before people really want it out of their chairs. So we have M5 in front of us. Someone like to, Councillor Beath, like to like that item, move that item, seconded by anybody? Councillor Hanmer, let's have the conversation. Councillor Beath.
Well, I don't know. I just think that there's some cool things that come to us just kind of out of the blue, and or maybe not out of the blue, but I think this gives us some availability of, or some cash to be a little bit nimble to help groups out that need some special funding one time maybe, and yeah.
Perhaps as we start this, I'll ask the question. I see Mr. Bowman hopping up already, ready to answer the question I haven't asked, but probably knows what it is. Tell me more about this. Tell me more about what this is for, what we do now, and what, if we did something like this, what we do differently in the future.
Through you, Mayor Henry, Councillor Henry. Staff are seeing an increasing number of requests from community groups for either reductions in some of our parks, our trails, our event spaces, and we try and provide them. Let's say they want to have a run for a charitable organization, and they're asking for either half the cost or they're asking for it free of charge. So they can, in order to facilitate a stronger donation to that cause. And we try and provide them with in-kind if we can, or we provide them with a reduced rate. These are currently absorbed in our budgets, but we're getting more and more groups coming forward on a regular basis to have these events. Right now, as an example, would be St. Mary's Hospital Foundation is having their pickleball event at Rim Park, and we are providing that rental space at a reduced cost and or free. And so it's a community event, community endeavor, and it's done to enhance the benefit for the community. What we're asking for here is some dollars we could at least tap into, so it's not putting added pressure onto our current budgets to make this happen. If that answers your question.
So for a point of further clarity, and thank you for that, now I get a sense of the scope of what we mean by we receive a number of requests from the community. That's good meat on the bones. Is there currently, or are you proposing through this, a policy around what we do on these things, or is this going to continue to, in your mind, be ad hoc?
We, through you again, we would look for a policy through our team to determine the criteria for which these groups are operating. So it would not be willy-nilly, it would be done in a concerted effort so that we could say this really makes a lot of sense. And
is that, sorry, last follow-up, then I'll go back. Is that, in your view, because I know in your business plan, one of the conversations was, and reviews was around FRD, because we know we're getting increased pressure on that and we need to take a look at our facility rental discount. This sounds to me like a form of facility rental discount, but differently targeted. So is this the same endeavor? Is it a different endeavor? Are we looking at it piecemeal or are we looking at it as a whole?
It is different because, like I say, the FRD or the facility rental discount is for the affiliated organizations. It would be a different pot, if you will, but it would be through a criteria or a methodology by which we approve that funding for those particular groups.
Okay, so I'll go around for other sort of views. So I'm just getting a list. I've got Councillor Bonigar.
Through you, Chair Henry. When I saw this menu item come forward, the first thing that struck me was maybe we should reassess our policy. Is that something that we're already planning to do?
Through you, Councillor Henry, we don't really have a policy on this at the moment. For this,
Sorry, I meant the facility rental discount policy.
yes, the facility rental discount policy is currently on our menu list to review in the next few months.
I'll correct your menu word to work plan.
Pardon me?
Say work plan, not menu, because we're on a different kind of menu right now.
Oh, sorry. On our work, yes, it's on our work plan through our department. Yes.
So just to play devil's advocate, is this something that could essentially come up when you do reassess the FRD policy? Are we essentially funding something before the policy says it's necessary?
Again, the facility rental discount policy really affects the affiliated groups who are attached to the city and have a foundational agreement with us and a service agreement with us. So this is a group, like I said before, an example would be like St. Mary's Hospital or any charitable group who don't really have an affiliation with us per se and have all that criteria around it. So we would be looking to have it could dovetail together as a possibility, but I think it's a little bit of a separate entity.
Looking for other discussion from Councillor Freeman, then I can go back to.
My challenge is I'm really struggling with building more into the operating budget, and like look at where we're at. We're at 3.5%. You know, we're putting a lot of ornaments on the Christmas tree here in this menu, and these are all things that staff hadn't prioritized to come through the regular budget process, right? So I don't mind if we, you know, I would prefer if this is a pressure to see a policy first, see what you need, and then consider funding it out of tax rate stabilization for the first year or something. Once we have all the pieces in place, like that's my preference on this piece right now, so that we know where we're headed with this. Because staff recommended a 3.4% increase, and we're at 3.5% already, and we're not even through the menu items yet.
So let me see if I can read finance staff's minds on some of this. I'm sure I would hear from our CFO that they'd remind me that council, if it has community priorities, that it has a community priority and contingency reserve. And I would suggest, Councillor Freeman, that either one option is to approve this kind of option as coming, up to this amount from that reserve, subject to receiving a policy, council approving a policy, or not acting on it today. And when a policy comes forward, we can always activate the community priority and contingency reserve at any time. So it doesn't need to happen inside the budget cycle. In fact, that's why it's there. So I think I've read finance staff's minds. I'm seeing nods. And that actually would be my preference, to not deal with this today, to wait for a policy and then fund it at an appropriate level from the community priority and contingency reserve. But I'll go back now to the mover.
Yeah, so this is money for groups that come for, like St. Mary's, like your example, that have no affiliation with the city.
Yes.
So they're basic, and like they're asking for an in-kind sort of donation from the city. So if we go with taking it out of here and putting it in down the road in contingency, what happens, next week when a deserving group comes forward and needs, I don't know, some people move fencing or something like that they can't afford, or that they would like the city to help them out with? Like, do we have any way of helping them out with that if we don't pull this in through here?
Mr. Palmer?
Currently, these expenses are absorbed in our budgets, and hearing the conversation, I think it's well within our means to take back and work on a policy, and then in the future come back to council with a policy in order to see the criteria around it, I think we're happy to do that. We've seen increased costs coming forward, but we can still work towards that end result in the future with a solid policy. I'm very comfortable with that.
I think by putting it on the issue paper, you flagged the issue for us, and not all of us would have been
Yes.
aware it existed.
Yes.
So nobody's going to be surprised when a division comes forward with a policy on something that now we've heard of. Any further thoughts on this? I know we have a motion, but I think we could entertain just having it be withdrawn if everybody's in agreement with that. Okay. It's not complicated by having a lengthy debate on both sides of it. Okay, so that moves us to M6, foundational operating grants affiliated. Councillor Freeman. Sorry,
So,
pause. I have a question. I think we're going backwards.
Yes,
Councillor Hammer?
sorry. No, we're not going backwards. I think I need to declare a conflict with this one because of an organization I volunteer with that gets a foundational grant.
That would be a fair point to raise at this cycle. Thanks for interrupting me to do that. That's fair. And I think just procedurally for everyone on those kinds of items, that's a point of order, and it supersedes a whole heck of a lot of stuff that happens on agenda. So that was a very useful point of order to keep everybody where they need to be. Councillor Freeman, go ahead.
through Chair Henry, can you help me to understand what percentage increase over the current operational grant funding this would represent?
Through you, Councillor Henry. The current grant funding for foundational operating is just over 400, so it would be about 20%. Looking at somebody in finance. 80,000 on 400, 20%. Okay.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary increase in 1 year, considering that we're looking at 3.4% for everyone else. So I'm not comfortable with this. We could maybe think of stretching it out, like maybe doing 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, and do that over 8 years or something like that in an effort to start moving it forward, because 10,000 on feel right to do it all in 1 year. And again, like if we go back to the Excel sheet, that means we're looking at a 3.6% tax increase. And I think that's irresponsible.
Okay. So further conversation on M6 from others. Nothing's being moved. I've had suggestions that are more ethereal, but I think that's taking the temperature of council. Nobody's doing anything? Councillor Basak has something she would like to do. You would like to move the recommendation as printed? Moved by Councillor Basak. Is there a seconder? Councillor Veith, speak to your motion. Councillor Basak.
Again, I definitely appreciate the need to balance the proposed tax increase with other important things that we're doing. I think one of the reasons why I know how important this is the community groups in our community are facing real challenges with funding through grants and operational, and we know that donations are down generally, and so these community groups are doing really important equity work. They're doing really important arts and culture work. They're doing a lot with a little money, and I'm not sure if as a city we would be able to pull off the same that a small nonprofit would do, a scrappy small nonprofit. And so I think this 80,000 is going to go far and have a huge return on investment we might not otherwise see. And so I also feel the tension of a 3.6 versus a 3.4. I also really believe in this increase. So that's why I'm moving the motion, and I'll support it.
Further debate or discussion? Mayor Jaworski.
A question just to clarify some of what Council Freeman was discussing. The current budget is how much again, Beth? 200 or 100?
418,000 through you, Councillor Henry.
Yeah, 418,000 and $68 at the top of the second page of M6, the 14th page of the text-based menu papers.
Okay.
And the increment of $80,000 is, I think, 19.7%, as I calculated last night. Like, people said they were interested in talking about this, so I read some more and took out a calculator.
Good for you. Yeah, that's good.
Mayor, you still got the floor.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking through Councillor Freeman's in case this. Okay, well, we got a motion on the table. In case it fails, I might have an alternate motion.
Councillor Veith.
I think it's time that we increase this, that maybe 80,000 is too much. Maybe, like, what if it was 50 or 40? You know, could we amend the motion to?
So
I think we're overdue for
a couple of options.
up.
One option is vote down what's on the table, move something else. Second option is amend a bunch of stuff. Like that. Those are the two options. Or three, do nothing. Right? We'll vote this down and then do nothing. Right? Those are the three options. Councillor Mover Vassy.
I'd be interested in hearing your motion, Mayor.
I'm just catching the eye of fellow councillor over there.
So
I would be interested in hearing more of what she was thinking in terms of numbers. She probably has something that will move forward. Probably just not.
Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Chair Henry. I think what I'd like to do is see something in line with what we're asking the broader citizenry to do, where all the rest of the city functions exist. So sorry, can you bring up that Excel sheet? We're at 3.5%. So if we looked at a 3.5% increase on the 418,000, what's that? What? About 15,000. So what if we did 15,000 over the next 3 years? That'll ultimately get us to, a long ways along the track, and I'd be a lot more comfortable with that, and then go from there.
So again, staff are doing some work on M6R just to show what that would look like and what it would mean if it was approved. Yeah. And I see some broader discussion on people now doing a bunch of math in their heads where we haven't been doing as much to date. There are, after this item, Council has consideration of M7 and whether they want to phase it in, because this year already has a significant bump from taking the base to $15 an hour, or taking it all at once. Those have two different ways that they fan out across the board. And M11, which I've been advised, that's $300,000 in total. Just because they're shown in 100, 100, 100 doesn't mean that's how council has to take them. If they're available in year 3, they're available today. And so council can, not at a very detailed and long, laborious level, but council could shift those if there are numbers they're interested in balancing off across the 3 years in a different way than is currently presented. So just as people are looking ahead, that's stuff to think about, but we're not there yet. I've got more from Beth.
Through you, Councillor Henry, just as a point of clarification around where the $80,000 figure came from, that was last time the dollars were increased, and looking at if an increase had been made each year in the amount of funding for foundational operating in line with inflation, we would now be at a point where we were $80,000 more, just as a bit of context.
Yeah, I think that's good context. That's why I expected the number to come from, because I remember 2012 when we did the last bump. But the other thing that we've just sort of dealt with is taking on more and more of the LIN program funding, because we've been getting zero consistently, and it has not and may never be adjusted. So are we on their side? Are we all the way on the other side, or are we somewhere in the middle because we're being squeezed? And I think that's the conversation before council. I saw other hands, Councillor Veith and Mayor Jaworski.
Through you, Chair Henry, just a question to Beth. Do we get, I know a lot of these like neighborhood associations, right, for instance, are doing really great work and great programs for the city. Are we getting more and more applications for neighborhood associations and other foundational organizations?
Through you, Councillor Henry, we have probably 12 neighborhood associations right now and another 4 who are expressing interest in becoming affiliated. We also have sports groups that regularly approach us being interested in affiliation. And we have groups that, want to expand their programs. Some of them working with marginalized groups in our community, and so their ability to generate their own revenue is limited, and so our funding is really important to those groups too, and they're seeing an increased need, and so looking to us to increase the support as well. So it's really quite multifaceted in terms of the increased demand on this program.
Thank you.
Mayor Jaworski.
I would be happy to second Councillor Freeman's amendment of the amounts and duration as seen on the screen, and then we could vote on that.
So that's also one of the options I provided, amending the motion that was on the floor, and people can do that. The mover doesn't get a say in whether we can do that, just to vote. So if, Councillor Freeman, if you want to move said amendment, have it seconded, and then speak to it, we could do it that way. I think staff are ready for the amendment, since finance staff have already put it up on the big board. So moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Mayor Jaworski. And I'll have Councillor Freeman now as a good time for your comment.
Well, I guess just further to Beth's comments, we have allocated other resources towards neighborhood groups. So I think I'd like to be clear here, like that we've really increased funding towards neighborhoods over in this budget alone, including having a full-time staff person. So I think again, this is going to come down to a conversation around balance.
And I have Councillor Bodley.
Just a question, if I could, through your Chair Henry. Sorry, that's twice. Look out to Mayor Jaworski.
He got a lot more votes than 2. It's going to take a lot more work than that.
I wonder, given the importance of this and how you're speaking to this, I wonder if maybe you could speak to how or why this didn't emerge as part of your budget and why this is coming forward to us as a menu item.
I think that's appropriately looking up the ladder. The commissioner is notoriously absent at this point. So we'll look to the director.
Through you, Chair. As a division, we looked at the pressures that we had, and recognizing those pressures going forward, we felt this should be a menu item because some of the groups are still receiving funding. And Councillor Freeman is very correct, in so much as we have a neighborhood matching fund. We do have other opportunities for the neighborhood funding envelope, if you will. And with that thinking, we thought this is a pressure. We wanted to put it on the table to identify it going forward and try and keep it up to date, or keep it up to today's amounts, because the groups are telling us they're finding it very difficult, as was mentioned earlier. So that's why it was never put on that part of it. It was more to recognize the fact of the pressures that we have in the community going forward. And I think, if I may, if I heard the amendment correctly, we can work within that framework very easily, because they are still receiving funding. It's not like they're getting nothing, and we would work towards that envelope of dollars.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Bodley? Councillor Bassick.
Thanks, through you, Chair Henry. Just a couple of points. nonprofit groups are going to work with whatever they can find. And so there's no doubt that they'll be able to use this money, and 15,000 or 80,000, no one's going to complain about it. They're going to be glad to receive money. But they need the 80,000, probably more. And so I don't mean this at all to be disrespectful, but I feel really strongly about it being 80,000, and I believe that because I believe in equity, and equity isn't about balance. Equity is about treating difference where different treatment is needed in order to achieve better outcomes for people who come from different starting lines. And I believe this money is used to best support, in many cases, marginalized communities, and not all. And so I still really strongly believe in the 80,000, though I appreciate the attempt to balance. I don't believe that's what equity is about.
Okay. So we've had a discussion on the amendment by Councillor Freeman and Mayor Jaworski, so I will take the vote on the amendment. So that's to adjust the funding level to 15, 15, 15 over the 3 years. So that's what's on the floor, an amendment for that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Vassic. So now we have the main motion as amended, which is now reading 15, 15, 15. We have to vote on that. So same motion that we just effectively voted on, but we do have to vote on it again. All those people may vote differently. All those in favor? That's all of us, and that's why we do it. Because people may feel differently depending on where the motion comes and how it's adjusted and how it's arrived at. All right, so we'll get Councillor Hanmer back. And I'm sorry, Councillor Henry, I don't have entrance music for you as you return to the chambers. You can think about what the Ward 1 entrance music should be, should we ever get there. That's good things to think about after we're done. We approved early approval of capital funding to advance things. Maybe that will be on the docket. So now we're looking at M7 or M7A. I'll look to Councillor Freeman.
Through Chair Henry, I'm interested to advance M7. I think that it's a commitment that we have to our community to be a living wage employer. And I think to get there, it's better to do it over time. And, it's something I believe in and I think we should do. And I like how staff have recommended the phase-in. And so I'd like to move M7 as written.
Seconded by Councillor Bodley, and I think for that clarity, it's not that these are necessarily recommended, it's that they're options for council, so council can decide what it wishes to pursue. But yes. Comments from council on the motion? Mayor Jaworski.
I think this is something that we've, as a council, thought about for quite some time, and I know from our new strategic plan and our pillar on equity, inclusion, sense of belonging, this is important to all of us, and I think that this is a great way for staff to have given us to achieve what we wish with respect to living wage and address the affordability challenges in our own way in our community.
Through you, Chair Henry, when I started going through the menu items, I actually gasped in excitement when I saw this one. The story of Waterloo is often one of success and wealth, but that's not always shared. And this is one way where we can, in a small manner, start shifting the dial for employees within the city itself. So I think I'm happy to support M7. Don't be misled. There is a rise coming this year. It's just already factored into the budget. So I'm very excited to see this come forward, and I'm very happy to support it.
Yes, I have Councillor Bodley, and just on clarity, council's direction in last year was that 2020, the minimum would be $15 an hour as if that had never changed. So that's already been built into what's in there, and this is whether or not we go beyond. Councillor Bodley?
Thank you through Chair Henry. I didn't quite gasp when I saw it, but I was quite pleased. So, the other thing that I think this speaks to two things that are really challenging within our strategic plan. One of them being the discussion that we have around economic disparity in our community. That is really difficult for us to tackle, and for us to be tackling it in house is really. From my perspective, it shows leadership. We often hear when we go to Chamber of Commerce Business Leaders Gala from living wage employers who say that if you can't be a living wage employer, then you're not running your business in the appropriate manner. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to show leadership in this regard. And I'm very pleased to see that come in.
Further discussion, Council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then. All those in favor? That's all of us. And that brings us down to M11. I'll give staff an opportunity to catch us up. And so we have some options into how to advance M11. Councillor Freeman, why don't you start us off with some thinking?
Thank you very much for letting us know that we could do all 300 in 2020, and I would like to move that. I think that would be prudent. I agree with the decisions we've made on the menu items up until this point, and so this is a good way to. So can I see what that looks like? Because I don't want to kill 2021 in doing something. So it might be that be that I want to do like 150 and then 150. So.
I was going to suggest exactly looking at
so
both of those options.
150 and 150, if I could see that, that would be tremendous.
We almost got to see the first one.
Yeah.
Brad's typing fast. This is good.
Okay, that looks great. So that's what I'd like to move, please.
So Councillor Freeman moves that, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll simply comment. I think most of us have had the opportunity to figure out what this means, and I know Mr. Hatinga says this revenue is available and is sustainable at this level and this basis. So this is useful information. Okay. So seeing no further discussion on that, I'll take the question. All those in favor? And that's all of us. And that concludes, for my sense, the menu list. Was there anything else I should be aware of? I don't think there is. That is helpful. We will give staff a minute to deal with the outside budget requests. Brad is ready to go. So we're shifting into 6.14 under the city utilities section. I would remind council that we approved the utility rates a couple of weeks back. This is what built into those. So I'll look for 6.14 first, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Mayor Jaworski. That's B48 through B61. Anything in there to take separately, council? I hope not. Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried? Good, because those are the rates. Makes it kind of awkward if we change them a bit later. Notices have already gone out. B15, base budget requests committed. I'll look for a mover of this section. Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Vasek. That's B62 and B63. All those in favor? That's carried. Now I'm at the top of page 32. Mr. Rapp, was there anything to know about B71? Here I have some recollection of a conversation on B71 and timing. Mr. Rapp?
Certainly, Chair Henry, a couple of members of council had asked if, logistically, if the likelihood of us hiring the supervisor would occur in that first year, with the hiring of the manager also occurring in that year. It's true that the earliest we would probably hire would be in the fall sometime. So it wouldn't be harmful to the program if that were delayed by a year. If it's not delayed by a year, any of those months where we don't have the person in place, those funds would just go back into the reserve to help with the ongoing emergencies, things like that. So it doesn't have a huge impact on us either way, from a rates perspective or from a program perspective.
Okay, so let me take B64 through B70 at once. Again, mover for that. Moved by Councillor Vasek, seconded by Councillor Veith. Team V. All those in favor? That's carried. And we've heard what Mr. Rapp said about B71. I'll look to the councillors who I don't actually know who it was to identify what they wanted to do with that information. Councillor Bonagor?
Given Councillor Rapp, no, you're a councillor now. Given Commissioner Rapp's feedback, so this was a question that I had asked in the business plan discussions. I'd be willing to raise the idea of pushing this out 1 year if other councillors are interested in that. I'll just leave it at that.
Councillor Vasek?
I was also interested in the same thing originally, but I think I'm okay because I feel like at this point the staff team kind of knows where we're at with it, and they also know what their need will be once the manager's hired and once they develop their plan. So if the best time to have the supervisor start is December, I don't want them to have to delay it until January or come back. And so I feel like staff are aware that this is an idea we have, and they're going to take it in the best interest of both their budget as well as the needs of the stormwater program. So I'm okay with leaving it this year at this point. I'm moving it as it is, yeah. But I
Sure.
felt similarly.
Seconded by Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, and I think that's one of the useful pieces of context that Mr. Rapp provided as well is just, we've adopted the 2020 rates, so it's baked in whether it's moved or not. If it doesn't go forward and you get 10 months of allocated dollars in there, that builds into the reserve. And we do know that Storm has some challenges, and we just saw the Stormwater Master Plan. So there are continuing needs, and to the extent that we have a well-funded reserve actually helps with rate impact in later years on the rate model, not hurts. So I think there's some assistance in that regard. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? I'll take a comment from nobody in particular. All those in favor then? Carried. That's everyone. Operating impacts of capital and growth requests committed. That's G19, moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? That's carried. Operating impacts of capital and growth recommended. That's G20, 21, and 22. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? That's everyone. And that's the end of the utilities enterprise. What remains are the remaining enterprises. Base budget requests funding. That's B72 through B74. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Was there anything councillors had on this section? Remember to honk if you park longer than 2 hours. I'm just knowing that we went through a lot of pages there, and I want to make sure everybody feels caught up. Okay, I'll take the vote then. All those in favor? That's carried. And that takes us to 6.20, base budget request, 6.20, I guess. Base budget requests recommended. just be 75. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? That's carried. Operating impacts of capital and growth requests, 6.21. That's item G23 at the top of page 36. Inflation. Inflation is moved by Freeman. Well, the inflationary increase is moved by Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. None of us have that kind of power. All those in favor? That's carried. And that takes us to the capital budget. I would look, Council, we took a brief break later. This is an obvious break if people would like it, between operating and capital. Would people like it? Or would people like to keep moving forward? We can keep moving. I'll wait for staff to let me know if we're ready for the capital budget, because I know that's a switch between Brad to Julie.
So yeah, Julie's indicating that we're ready to go. However, the capital file won't be projected. We'll have the conversation around the items that we need to, and then she'll make any changes, and then we'll read out the routine and non-routine totals. And Councillor Henry has it. There's a few items where we'll remove from those approvals as conflicts that were earlier raised. We'll take them separately.
Yeah. Brad, Julie, and I will help two councillors navigate that. So we had reference 111, Employment Parks Gateway improvements to deferred to 2022, which has been accommodated, and further confirm the location of the works. Is that information we should expect at this time? I think it is. Justin, would you care to further confirm the location of the works for us, please?
Yes, through you, Chair Henry. The plan is to engage with some of the local business community, determine what they feel might be the best option. Obviously, there's the option being the gateway into the park piece, or looking at potentially a gateway into the city along Northfield. So we'll consult through our expansion and retention program efforts, and report back to council on what we feel is the best course of action there.
Okay, so that was some information. Any questions on that information, Council? Councillor Bodley?
Through you, Chair Henry. So just for clarification, you're not actually confirming the location. You're confirming that you're going to confirm the location.
That's right.
Sweet.
A week is a long time in politics, but not long enough in economic development.
That's right.
Okay, so that's 111. And the other one was that staff be directed to report back on budget day to confirm the timing and priority of 131 and 136. It's two different lot resurfacing projects in the routine file. What further information do we have on that, Christine?
Through you, Chair Henry. So there's a retaining wall in the DuPont lot, and the city has a structural assessment saying that retaining wall needs to be repaired, and it is best to pair the resurfacing work of that parking lot with the work that's to be done on the retaining wall, because the retaining wall may need to shift when it's re-engineered. So it's best to pair those two things together. Also, the condition of the DuPont lot is worse than the condition of the station lot. We're seeing more significant damage. And as a result of the risk management plans that the city entered into 2019 with the region of Waterloo with respect to the new source water protection legislation, the city is responsible for maintaining an impermeable surface on our parking lots in order to protect our drinking water supply from the risks of road salt. So staff would not recommend deferring the DuPont lot resurfacing. With respect to the station lot, that work can be delayed, and the city can do surface crack repair work in the interim if that's what council decides.
And if council so desired, what duration of deferral would staff feel is appropriate?
Through you, Chair Henry, at this point, I would say 2 years.
So that would move it from 2020 to 2022. Councillor Bonagor, these were your items. Is that what you were hoping to hear?
That sounds like it would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for bringing that information forward.
So I'll give capital budget staff an opportunity to incorporate a 2022 timing for 136. Not that it really falls outside of the window that we'll get numbers for. I'll get some guidance on how to write a motion to that effect. Okay, so there's nothing further in here. I don't expect that there should be anything further in this section. So I'll look to staff to give me the numbers for recommendation 1 for routine projects excluding capital reference 135, so that we can take that separately without Councillor Bonagor.
That council approve the CAO department's routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $3,970,000.
Thank you. And Julie, for clarity, would it be helpful for us to add language here directing the move of 136 to 2022? All right, so if you can capture that in the recommendation. I guess it's, and that, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it would be best to make that a separate recommendation, and then depending on the result of that, then I would think we would add in a third that would have the total. It depends on it, if that works with finance staff. So the next recommendation would be, if council has, if there is a mover and a seconder, to move capital budget item, reference item 136 to the year 2022.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, let's take as the first motion, Councillor Bonagor moves that project reference 136 be moved to 2022, seconded by Councillor Bodley. We'll take that first. All those in favor? That's everyone. So now the motion that's before us should read the same way as we just heard. And that's the council approved the CAO's department's routine capital projects, including yada, 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 with the total of 3970000. Like inclusive of except for reference 135. I think that's in the middle. Team capital products included in capital budget except for reference 135 with a total value of. Does that make sense, Julie? Because
Yes.
we have to account for the conflict of Councillor Bonagor, so she cannot vote on reference 135. So we should exclude it from the motion.
Yeah.
All right. So after the words 2020 to 2022 capital budget except for reference 135 with the total of blah, blah, blah. Okay. So noted. All those in favor? Has it been moved? Did we not move it and seconded it yet? No, because we were doing a bunch of dancing. Okay. Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Okay. All those in favor? There we go. And that's all of us. Councillor Bonagor will exit. And after she's exited, we'll hear about the vast totals of reference 135. Thank you. So I'm hearing a motion that would sound like that council approves the CAO. Sorry, why don't you finance staff just tell me what we're approving? I realized halfway through it didn't sound right coming out of my mouth, so I'm going to leave it to somebody else to give me some words. Julie?
That council approve the perimeter lot resurfacing project in 2022 for $206,000.
$206? Yes, okay. So moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. At the level of how big it was, it looked like an 8 to me, but when I zoomed in, it was a 6. I had it way too small. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. We'll welcome back Councillor Bonagor in a moment. No, she hasn't selected any. We don't have a karaoke machine. I didn't see a line item for that, Councillor Bodley. You could bring one in from home, since apparently that's your bag.
That council approve the CAO department's non-routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $39,883,000, with funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Vassic, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favour? That's carried. 7.2, Community Services Capital Budget Requests. So as noted, 274, that first part has been shifted and will be accounted for in the numbers we hear. The second item, that staff be directed to report back on budget day on the feasibility of adding an additional budget line relating to an accessible washroom at the Button Factory, along with associated timelines to be funded from CIRF and the Economic Development Reserve. Does Commissioner Dykstra have further information for us?
Through you, Chair Henry, maybe I'll start this one, and Mr. McFadden's going to come up to the microphone as well. Staff have taken that one away, and we believe there is a recommended strategy to fund that accessible washroom in 2022 in the amount of $250,000. And the funding source, I'm going to refer that to Justin. I know we've talked long and hard about the split between using CURF and our Economic Development Reserve, and maybe I'll turn it to Justin now to just comment on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Through you, Chair Henry. Economic Development does have a mild concern with respect to providing some funding for this from the Economic Development Reserve. I know it's not a material amount. It won't really affect the reserve. We are concerned a little bit about precedent and specifically what it's for. The intent of the reserve is really around making strategic investments that leverage funding from other sources to create sustainable initiatives. Typically, jobs is what we're trying to drive there. So we appreciate the linkage towards an arts and culture initiative, and we are having some discussions with various arts and culture groups. So we hope to make an investment in one of those initiatives as time goes on. But we're just a little concerned about making an investment, particularly in this, which is really more of a building fix, so building upgrade. Yeah.
So in terms of the response then on the funding source, that additional information is provided, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, if I can just then layer in, Chair Henry, the finance team can probably help here a little bit too with actual numbers, but we did look at the balance over the 10-year forecast of the CURF reserve, and we believe that there is capacity to add this project in 2022, as I noted earlier, at the amount of $250,000, and that CURF reserve can sustain that new project addition.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I'll look to Councillor Bonagor, who raises.
I really, through you, Chair Henry, I really appreciate you looking into this. I've just got a couple of questions. Given that the elevator is pegged at $500,000, a washroom would cost $250,000. I'm just wondering if you could explain why this line is being suggested at what looks to be a fairly high amount.
There are two items. The budget has been provided with two new accessible barrier-free washroom and one universal washroom. That's how that was budgeted. And it is true that we have put some additional padded amount in there because of the unknown that we may face here as a result of heritage building. If there will be any lift or hoist to be installed in the washroom, it needs structural support, and we don't know what's behind the wall, and just wanted to have some additional precaution, and that's one of the reasons we put some work. And in addition to that, there are some extra work to be done around the building. So by 2025, we have to be in compliance with all the accessible accessibility for all the barrier-free area for all the City of Waterloo buildings. We are working on that. We don't know how far that we can. There's a group working right now on it, and we will have to formalize that in the coming year. But this amount is at this point is more of a placeholder, just so that we don't have to come back again.
And just so that I'm understanding, so it would include 3 washrooms? Did you say two new barrier-free washrooms and 1 accessible? Is that correct?
Yes, I said 2 new washroom plus 1 universal. 2 barrier-free washroom and 1 universal.
Okay. And all 3 washrooms are covered by this single line, correct?
That's right. That's
okay.
Right. Yeah.
Just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson, I saw your hand.
Yeah, if I can just layer into Sunda's remarks as well. The team obviously has not had a lot of time to do any of the real design work on this, and there will be a consultation process with the Button Factory Arts team. The exact layout within the building, I think, was the other aspect where the current washrooms are. It may shift just the functionality opportunity of reinvesting in these facilities. So they did leave a little bit of latitude in the budget. At the end of the day, if there is a surplus in the budget allocation, it gets returned to the CURF reserve.
So let me ask. I hear 2022, which is inside this council's envelope and inside the approval rather than the forecast. Would staff find any benefit if this was prior to 2025, since we have some deadlines, but after this budget cycle, so that we didn't have to do an approval today without really seeing a sheet and without the team having to develop it? If it was looking for the 2023 approval, would that be a more feasible time to develop this project and make sure that everybody's comfortable with the numbers and the scope and the design and the consultation? I'm seeing some interest in that. So let me pose the question then. Would that be helpful? I'll look to Mr. Anderson and Sunda if you want to add anything.
Sure. Through you, Chair Henry, I think, speaking on behalf of the facilities team, they have a lot on their plate this term of council, so probably from a workload perspective, it would assist. Of course, just to punctuate, we are separating these 2 projects from the elevator need at that facility, and so that's a project that is moving forward in 2020. So yes, if it sits in the 2023 forecast, then the next term of council would see a full budget sheet on it. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm hearing interest from the original instigator is the wrong word, but that the suggester. I don't really have a good word sitting up here at this point in the day, but 2023. So when we get to the forecast, I would be adding some direction, and when we get that far, but we don't need to do anything with the 2 motions in front of us then. Okay, if council's agreeable generally. That also gives the Button Factory a break between constructions. Everybody seems to like breaks between constructions. Okay. So thank you for that information and the quick work and turnaround, and to help us just very briefly understand how coming up to code and AODA requirements means starting something means doing a lot of things, not just one thing. And when you start doing major renovations, that triggers a whole lot of requirements in code that layers in cost, but makes things work for everybody. But we need time to get it right. Okay. So with that means we can work into the motions at hand. I'll look for routine project numbers first. From Julie when she's ready.
That council approved the Community Services Department routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $18,792,000.
Okay, moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. And in non-routine projects, it'll read as printed except after 2020 to 2022 capital budget, except for reference 201, which is Councillor Vasic's conflict. And I'll look for the number from Julie.
The council approve the Community Services Department non-routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with the exception of reference 201 with a total value of $29,705,000 with funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council.
Okay, moved by Councillor Vasek, maybe, Councillor Veith. All those in favor? That's carried. We'll see you soon. And Julie, what's left?
That council approve the community services contribution to post-secondary recreation facility expansion, reference 201, for $5 million in 2020.
With funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any discussion there? Seeing none, and of course that's all subject to whether grants show up or not and what Laurier plans to do with whatever they hear. All those in favor? That's carried. We'll welcome back Councillor Vasek. Again, so much opportunity for entrance music. That takes us to 7.3, capital budget requests for corporate services. So there is one point of direction here, and this was staff be directed to report back on budget day to confirm the timing, scope, and funding sources for item 402, website refresh. Tony is already up at the podium before I can even bring up his sheet. Right, go ahead, Tony. Tell us more.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. So the requested capital dollars are for systemic improvements, as we don't have an in-house front-end developer for ongoing improvements. In addition, as is the case with technology, there are ongoing system upgrades. Prior to the last refresh in 2018, the city's website fell behind and reached a point where the version that we were using was no longer going to be supported. That, in fact, led to the refresh being a much larger undertaking than it otherwise might have been. If we do regular upgrades and refresh, the change isn't as dramatic and also means we're delivering a better user experience. We don't upgrade every time there is a change, but we did fall too far behind, and that would be the danger in pushing this out a little too far. The funds that we're requesting, which are non-routine, are projected to cover the core website and additional improvements of related digital services that aren't currently optimized for mobile devices or AODA compliance. This would include redesigning the user interface of our in-house applications and adding functionality to other current offerings such as mobile payment processing. Since the new website was launched, mobile users have increased by over 4,000% and now make up the largest percentage of our users. Many of our services do not work properly in the area where most traffic is currently moving. The cost of AODA compliance is also going up. Proposed changes from the province to the information standard include total accessibility for all components of digital services, not just the core website. We also believe that the website can play a role in supporting Council's equity and inclusion strategy, as the website is, as mentioned, is accessible to many, and smartphones are the preferred choice of access. We're currently on a journey to enhance the user experience of the website, and it's one that never ends. Prior to the refresh in 2018, we had 2.2 million unique page views. In 2019, after the refresh, that increased to 3.6 million. Not a finance person, but I believe that's a 61% increase. I would now ask one of my finance colleagues to just add a little bit about background about the funding source.
Through Chair Henry to all of council. So there were a few projects in the capital budget that we've determined to have citywide benefit. So that's where you will see the various enterprises contributing approximately 15% of the project funding. So that's kind of been applied as a general rule across the board. The balance of the funding is split equally 50-50 between CURF and CRF. So basically the rationale there is that this project's going to have elements of both rehabbing an existing asset, but also elements of growth on some of the new enhancements. So we've kind of used that growth rehab split in some of the cases where it isn't perfectly defined one way or another. So that's kind of the rationale behind the 50-50 split on the balance between CURF and CRF. But as Tony mentioned, we feel that the funding amount and splits are appropriate.
Okay, thank you for that further information. Council, having received it, any thoughts, Council, or are we satisfied with the information we've received relative to what's before us? I assume that we are. This was moved into non-routine, correct? Okay, so I'll take the recommendation for routine projects.
That council approve the Corporate Services Department routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $7,152,000.
Okay, moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Mayor Jaworski. All those in favor? That's carried. That takes us to non-routine projects. Seeing nothing being split out, I'll take the number.
That council approve the Corporate Services Department non-routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $9,424,000 with funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. And that takes us to Integrated Planning and Public Works. According to Mr. Rapp, the place where everything happens to affect everybody's lives all the time, incessantly, insidiously, behind the scenes, through the pipes, underground, in the air. Okay, that's enough. So we had two sets of directions. It's going to be a loopy part of the day. That staff be directed to defer item 590, that's Beaver Creek and Conservation Drive reconstruction for 2 years. That's being incorporated into the numbers that we will hear. The second item, moved by, that staff be directed to report back on budget day regarding item 722. That's the Caroline Street Decorative Street Lighting Project relating to project scope, timing, and any associated cost savings related to this item and removal of hydro poles on Caroline being done at the same time. I think this was a multi-component project of all of this. So Mr. Rapp has the further information on what staff have.
Certainly, through Chair Henry to all of council. There were three components really. What I was looking at is first question was, does the project include the relocation of the poles on the west side of the street? It does include those three poles. The estimated cost is about $50,000. The second part of it was, can the budget for this project be shifted out? Yes. The bulk of the project could be moved out to 2022 as our recommendation, or my recommendation. I'd prefer to keep it within this budget just in case an opportunity arrives with development activity on Caroline that we can access the money, move it forward. In addition, though, I would request that $50,000 remain for 2020 to allow for that pole relocation, which we would like to do this year. And then the third part of the project I was asked to look at is, would cost efficiencies be lost by not proceeding with the decorative lights when the poles are being relocated? The answer is highly unlikely. The proposed decorative street lights would be for pedestrian level lighting versus vehicular level lighting. The decorative lights would not likely be mounted on those street poles because the frequency for those pedestrian lights would be higher than for the cars. So we wouldn't really mount those decorative lights on those poles. So it's unlikely that there would be any cost savings by still keeping the project whole.
Okay, I think that matches the information we were looking for, as I recall. I'm not seeing any difference. So what we'll need is an understanding from the numbers about what's being included and any additional direction that we need to provide for clarity on that. Yes, sorry, 1 second. I realized I don't have. Okay. Caroline, was that routine or non-routine? I can't remember. Non-routine? Okay. which means I can easily take the routine project numbers.
That council approve the Integrated Planning and Public Works Department routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $86,668,000.
Okay, moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. And that takes us to non-routine. We'll have to figure out what to do with 722, but I understand Councillor Bonagora has another item to discuss in this section before we start taking numbers.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair Henry. I just wanted to raise item 593, which is the Ira Needles Boulevard, the Ira Needles bypass. I understand why it has been proposed, but I can no longer in good conscience support the project. I think this extension perpetuates the behaviours we are trying to stop with our climate emergency. So I'm just indicating I plan to vote against that line.
Okay. All right. So we need to deal with the split of 722 and take a separate vote on 593, I think would be helpful. About the information Mr. Rapp provided? Sure, we'll double back. Go ahead. Now is a good time.
Sorry. And maybe this isn't a question for Commissioner Rapp. Maybe this is a question for the people who move this. I'm just curious about what the advantage of moving it from 20 to 22. What are we seeking to accomplish by moving it within this budget cycle, but out by 2 years?
Councillor Freeman?
The money's not needed right now. So it's really just kind of for lack of a way to say it, right-sizing the budget. What is needed is to move those poles. And that's critically important from a pedestrian access and pedestrian safety perspective. And the choice, and the reality is this council has said no to decorative lighting in other parts of the city. And so I think it's of value to really set our minds to whether or not it's needed and whether or not we want to advance those pieces. So if that makes sense, yeah.
And Councillor Bonagora, who was the other half of the motion last week.
Through you, Chair Henry. And also thank you to Commissioner Rapp for bringing that forward. I very much appreciate it. The reason I seconded this was really to make sure that we moved the poles as soon as we could. The decorative part is nice. It's all well and good. It's much less important than the accessibility of the sidewalk. So for the decorative part to come later, I'm totally fine with that. But I just want to have those poles moved. So I very much appreciate staff being able to split that out so we can get that work done. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll look to staff for some insight onto how we provide direction on the split that Mr. Rapp has mentioned for 722, and then taking the first crack at the non-routine list without 593 so that we can take it separately. We'll give staff a minute since there's some numbers to move. See, Julie is ready.
That council approve the Integrated Planning and Public Works Department non-routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget, except for reference 593, with a total value of $67,029,000, with funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk if there's anything extra we need to do about Mr. Rapp's information on 722 in this direction.
I think it would be helpful for the purpose of the minutes to have some clarity around what that amount is for 722.
I mean, the overall number is encapsulated because it's all movement within the same approval. So simply identifying at some level the split that Mr. Rapp has noted between the splitting the funding for the project timing between. I'm not sure what level of detail we need on splitting that project line between 2020 and 2022. Mr. Rapp?
Through Chair Henry. Perhaps the simplest way would be that all of the project, the funding for the project be, save and except $50,000 be moved to 2022. And keep it as simple as that. Would that work for the clerk?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So noted. We'll assume the motion that someone's about to move contains the relevant words to give effect to what Mr. Rapp just said. I'll look for a mover. I'll recap after we get moved. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. So the motion before us is the non-routine items in IPPW except for 593, which is, we'll take that in a second. And there's some extra language in the recommendation to give effect for the split of project 722 into sort of 50 grand in 2020 and the rest in 2022 to deal with the information Mr. Rapp provided. So that's what's before us and on the table. All those in favor? That's carried. And I'll get the language for adopting 593.
That council approve the Ironitas Boulevard bypass reference 593 non-routine project in 2020 with funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council.
You moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Bodley. So I know we've had discussion against discussion in favor, I presume, by the mover and seconder. Go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
Yeah, if I could. While I appreciate what Councillor Bonagor is saying, I really think that the major inducer of demand, for lack of a better word, if that is appropriate phrasing, is the Costco. And I don't know that the road is necessarily inducing additional demand. And based on all of the work that we've seen through the West Side Multimodal Transit Study, we see that there is a need to alleviate some of the traffic pressures that we've put out there, and I think it's a welcome ability for us to alleviate some of the pressure on that roundabout at Urban Herbsville. It's welcome from the perspective that it's going to give residents from Vista Hills not only the way out through Platinum Drive, but also a way out through this bypass road. So I'm in support of it, and I know that this is in conversation even with some of my friends in the environmental advocacy community. They've been pushing for this bypass road in conversations that I've had with them, and they were pleased to see that it was coming forward in this term. So I will be supporting moving it forward for those reasons.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Henry? Is there further discussion,
If
Councillor
there isn't,
Bassett?
I'll comment.
Through you, Chair Henry, I just wanted to add this because I've been doing a lot of reading on suburbs and poverty and affordability, and so I'm not an expert in it, but like my work surrounds the geographical distribution of poverty, right? Like I've said. So some of the research indicates that we're now moving to this suburbanization of poverty, and where the only places people can afford to live are in the suburbs. And so then that also can make it difficult to access downtown, so then only part of the city becomes theirs, and like the downtown areas don't also become theirs because we don't have like sufficient transportation, and then it means that they get to spend even less time with their families, which has trickle-down effects for well-being. And so while I really love you're not wanting to perpetuate this, like the motorist, like car culture, and to promote active transportation in different ways to the center of the city, I'm also thinking about the affordability piece out there. And so how do we get from where we are now with this car culture to where we want to be, and then making sure that in between there, everyone has access to the heart of the city too. So I really love where you're coming from with the motion, but I'm also really struggling with it for those reasons.
And comment from Councillor Bonagor, then I'll let Councillor Hammer wrap.
Through you, Chair Henry, I do appreciate all of that, and I do appreciate and understand why this is brought forward. One of the compounding issues when I was thinking about it is that we're building a new city road to alleviate pressure on two regional roads. And I think we need to think very holistically as to what we're providing, where we're providing it, and what kind of city we are telling the world we're building here. Yes, the road will ease transit through a part of the city. It's also largely going to be used to get from one big box store to another. And I appreciate that it serves other purposes. I also appreciate that this is probably going to pass, but I just needed to state where I stood on it.
And before passing it to Councillor Henmer, I'll note from a funding perspective, half development charges collected from developers, and the other half is from developer themselves that owns the land through which it will traverse. So it's 100% funded at a capital level from non-property tax sources. Councillor Hammer.
Thank you, Chair Henry. That was one of the points I was going to make, that it's coming from our developers. I appreciate that we have initiated a climate emergency and want to follow up with a climate action plan. And I would hope that as we're looking at the road and it's being put in place, that it will have a complete streets feel. So it will encourage bike lanes, encourage pedestrian walkways, and getting people, and hopefully even connecting to the trail network that continues through. So it is something, I'll echo as Councillor Bonagor has, or Councillor Bodley has said, it is something that residents in my ward have also expressed a need to alleviate and give some options for traffic control. I appreciate that it is a city road that we would be putting in. However, our whole infrastructure, roads, trails, etc., to me is a partnership between ourselves, the City of Kitchener, and also the region. So I look at this as being a further portion of the partnership, and I do hope that we can move it forward with putting in all the things we want in place to encourage multimodal transportation, encourage the increase in our transportation for those that are moving out into, I'm not sure that I would call Ward 1 and Ward 2 suburbs yet, but we absolutely are, so that people can get around our city. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have the motion on the floor and discussion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Bonagor. Okay, that brings us to 7.5, the Waterloo Public Library. Julie, when you're ready, I'll take the routine projects number.
That council approves the library routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $1,502,000.
Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. That's all of us. Next, non-routine projects when you're ready, Julie.
That council approve the library non-routine capital projects included in the 2020 to 2022 capital budget with a total value of $0 with funding to be approved through a follow-up report to council.
So y'all can vote against this one and it won't cost anybody anything, but we'll take the motion anyways. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. If ever you wanted to move no money, use the moving of no money. All those in favor? Carried. And that brings us to the capital forecast. I'll take the CAO's number when you're ready, Julie.
That council approve in principle the 2023 to 2029 CEO Department's capital forecast totaling $8,939,000.
Okay, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. All those in favor? That's carried. Next, we have community services, but we need additional direction for the Button Factory accessibility washroom and other needs item. I'll look for advice on how that gets directed. Julie?
I'm thinking something along the lines of that council approve in principle the 2023 to 2029 community services capital forecast, including $250,000 for an accessible washroom in 2023 for the Button Factory, totaling $100,502,000.
Okay, so maybe we'll add an S on washrooms since we've heard it's more than one. Moved by Councillor Vasek, seconded by Councillor Veith. Team B, yes. I started a thing today, apparently. There we go. I knew you would, Councillor Vasek. Moved and seconded. Clerk has that. Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. And now corporate services.
That council approve in principle the 2023 to 2029 Corporate Services Department capital forecast totaling $44,204,000.
Moved by Councillor Freeman, Councillor Bodley. Team B. We've still got one more. We'll get there. All those in favor? That's carried. To the top of page 40, you can integrate planning and public works there, Team B. I'll get a number for you to be on top of. You asked for it. Julie?
It's getting late early.
Getting silly.
That council approve in principle the 2023 to 2029 Integrated Planning and Public Works Departmental capital forecast totaling $221,497,000.
Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. All those in favor? Carried. Waterloo Public Library.
That council approve in principle the 2023 to 2029 library capital forecast totaling $4,461,000.
Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Vasek. All those in favor? That's carried. And whenever you're ready, Julie.
That the 2020 to 2022 capital budget of $275,446,000 be approved, and further the council approve in principle the 2023 to 2029 capital forecast totaling $379,603,000.
This would be the roll-up. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All those in favor? And that is the capital budget and forecast. Section 8 in the middle of page 40, debenture financing. You will see that these projects are not new. We just approve them up above. Mayor Jaworski moving the whole slate in 8, 1, 2, and 3. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Item 9. When Brad's ready.
And if Kevin wouldn't mind putting back the projector, just in case I say the wrong number. So through Chair Henry, that the 2020 operating budget be approved with an average property tax increase of 3.4% over 2019 and a total property tax levy of $79,268,666. That the 2021 operating budget be approved with an average property tax increase of 3.5% over 2020 and a total property tax levy of $115,258, and that the 2022 operating budget be approved with an average property tax increase of 3.1% over 2021 and a total property tax levy of $86,804,574.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. That's the work we did today. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you very much to staff and staff and staff and staff and staff, and of course the community at the outset of all of this for the input into this process and the work that we've done today. There are no public meetings, thank goodness. There's no consideration of notice given at a previous meeting. There is no notice of motion. There is no communications and correspondence or unfinished business. Are there any questions, Council? Is there new business, Councillor Bassick?
Hello. I know we've had a long day, but I just wanted to celebrate Vermont Park Neighborhood Association that's had a rink operating, I learned, this weekend for 20 years and a formal neighborhood association for 10. And they hosted their annual winter carnival on the weekend. I would guess there were probably more than 200 people out there. It was awesome. They do such great hard work in the community. I've been really excited to be a part of the group and actively involved for some years and supporting them in years before this. And the rink was impeccable. We didn't even bring our skates originally because I thought, oh man, with the freeze and thaw, it's going to be awful. But it was just beautiful, perfect, not a bump on it. So kudos to Vermont Park Neighborhood Association and to the neighborhood team on staff who are doing a great job supporting. Yeah, Julie in particular is very active with that group. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think that vignette of a story just speaks broadly to the work that we've done today and the kinds of things that we want to see flourish and grow throughout our community. Is there any further new business, Council? Seeing none, I need enactment of bylaws, moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Freeman. All those in favor? That's carried. And someone to adjourn? Councillor Veith. Councillor Vassick, Team V wants to E. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.